My name is Clara. I'm a cartographer, a drawer of maps. I spend my days tracing the quiet contours of the earth, the gentle slope of a forgotten coastline, the intricate web of rivers that feed a valley, the precise location of ancient forests. I find comfort in the logic of landscapes, in the way everything fits together to form a whole. My life, the one I've carefully built here in the misty, rain-washed city of Port Blossom, is much the same. It's a map of my own making, drawn with lines of peace, routine, and a love as steady and reliable as the northern star. My husband, Leo, is the architect of that piece. He's a furniture maker, a man who understands the integrity of wood, the strength in a well-made joint. Our home is filled with the things he's built, a sturdy oak dining table that has borne the weight of countless quiet dinners, bookshelves that groan happily under their load, a bed frame that feels like a fortress against the world. We live in a small house with a mossy roof and a garden that is forever damp, where ferns unfurl in the shade and the air smells perpetually of wet earth and cedar. It is a world away from the one I grew up in. My childhood home was not a map of peace, but a battlefield of shifting allegiances, where love was a currency and my younger sister, Serafina, held all the wealth. They called her Sarah. She was born 3 years after me, arriving in the world with a wail so fragile it seemed the slightest breeze could shatter her. That fragility became her armor and her weapon. Where I was steady, she was volatile. Where I was quiet, she was a symphony of needs. My parents became the frantic conductors of that symphony, their lives dedicated to ensuring every note she played was one of happiness, or at least, appeasement. I learned early on that my role was to be the landscape upon which her drama unfolded, the sturdy, uncomplaining ground. When I was 7, my grandmother, a woman with kind eyes and hands that smelled of lavender, gave me a small, hand-painted music box. It played a tinkling, wistful tune that felt like a secret just for me. One afternoon, I found it in pieces on the floor of Sarah's room, its delicate ballerina snapped at the waist. Sarah was sitting in the middle of the wreckage, crying. Not tears of remorse, but of frustration. It wouldn't dance right, she sobbed when my mother rushed in. My mother's gaze didn't fall on the broken gift, but on me, standing silently in the doorway. "Clara, you know how sensitive she is," she'd said, her voice laced with that familiar, weary disappointment. "You should have kept it somewhere she couldn't reach." I was sent to my room to think about my carelessness, while Sarah was comforted with a story and a bowl of strawberries. I never got another music box. I learned instead that my possessions, my feelings, my very self, were secondary to the preservation of my sister's delicate emotional state. This pattern became the topography of our family. Sarah's failed ventures, a short-lived career as a poet, a disastrous attempt at artisanal soap-making that ended with a purple-stained bathroom, were never failures. They were explorations. She was finding her frequency, my father would say, with a proud, baffled smile. My own accomplishments, a scholarship to a prestigious university, a master's degree, a stable career I loved, were met with a perfunctory nod. They were expected. I was the reliable one, the one who didn't need cheerleading, the one who could handle it. The older we got, the more the distance between us solidified, like rock strata pressed down by years of unspoken resentment. I moved to Port Blossom, a city hundreds of miles and a world of emotional difference away from them. I met Leo. I built my quiet life. I learned to breathe. The calls from my family became less frequent, reserved for holidays or times when Sarah needed something alone for her latest creative enterprise, a sympathetic ear for a manufactured crisis. I learned to create boundaries, drawing them carefully on my life's map like property lines, fortified with polite but firm refusals. The last time I'd seen them all together was about a year ago. My mother had insisted on a family lunch at a trendy, overpriced bistro that served deconstructed salads on slate tiles. Sarah was in her newest incarnation, a curator of spiritual artifacts through an online boutique she called Earth and Grace Designs. She looked the part, draped in linen and adorned with rough-hewn crystals. The conversation was a minefield of pleasantries until, over coffee, Sarah turned to me, her eyes wide and guileless. "Clara, Darling, she began, a term she only used when she was about to ask for a significant favor. I was wondering, this Earth and Grace thing is really taking off, but the logistics are a nightmare. I'm sort of between addresses for the business side of things. Would it be the absolute end of the world if I used your address for some of the official paperwork? Just for a little while. You're so organized and stable. Stable. There it was. The word that meant boring, predictable, and strong enough to bear a burden that wasn't mine. My mother jumped in immediately, a cheerful, coordinated attack. We thought it was a wonderful idea. It's just temporary, of course. Just to help her get on her feet. It's what family does. The old Clara, the girl who lost the music box, would have felt the familiar weight of obligation settle on her shoulders. She would have swallowed her own needs and said yes, just to keep the peace. But the air in Port Blossom had changed me. Leo had changed me. I had learned the value of my own peace. I'm sorry, Sarah, but no, I said. My voice was quiet, but it didn't tremble. My home is my home, not a P.O. box. I'm not comfortable with that. The effect was instantaneous. Sarah's smile tightened. My mother's face went rigid. My father began studying the menu with intense interest. The temperature in the air dropped 20 degrees. The lunch ended shortly after. The freeze-out, as Leo called it, began. It wasn't a dramatic excommunication, but a slow, creeping glacier of silence. My birthday came and went without a call. Invitations to family gatherings were lost in the mail. My father sent me a single, clipped email about the importance of supporting creative spirits within the family. It was lonely, but it was also quiet. For the first time, my map had a clearly defined border, and I was the one who had drawn it. I told myself the quiet was a kind of victory. And it was, until the day before my 34th birthday. My phone rang, and it was my mother. Her voice was treacly, a river of honey I knew was hiding something sharp and dangerous beneath its surface. Clara, darling. We just wanted you to know, we've sent you a little something for your birthday. A surprise. It should be arriving tomorrow, right on time. My heart did a slow, wary turn. Oh, I said, my voice carefully neutral. You didn't have to do that. Nonsense, she chirped, a sound so unnaturally joyous it set my teeth on edge. It's just a little token. To show you how much we love you. You're our girl, Clara. Don't you ever forget it. The words hung in the air after she'd hung up. You're our girl. She had never, not once in my entire adult life, said that to me with such saccharine conviction. She said it to Sarah constantly. To me, she offered critiques disguised as concern. A stupid, hopeful part of me, a part one thought I had long since excised, flickered to life. Maybe they're trying. Maybe they miss me. Maybe this is an olive branch. But the other part of me, the cartographer who understood the hidden dangers of a landscape, knew that an olive branch from my family was more likely to be poison ivy in disguise. My birthday morning dawned in typical Port Blossom fashion, with a soft, persistent rain whispering against the window panes. Leo brought me coffee in bed, a ritual so comforting it felt like a prayer. He'd made blueberry pancakes, my favorite, and the scent of them, warm and sweet, filled our small house. It was perfect. It was our life, the one we had charted together. Then, the doorbell chimed, a sharp, intrusive sound that sliced through the morning's peace. On the front mat sat a medium-sized cardboard box. It was aggressively plain. No festive paper, no ribbon, just brown corrugated walls and a stark white shipping label. It was sealed with a kind of industrial precision, the tape perfectly straight, perfectly smooth. Leo brought it in and set it on the kitchen counter, his movements slow and deliberate. He didn't step away. He just stood there, staring at it as if he expected it to hiss. The rain drummed a little harder on the roof. That's from my parents, I said, trying to sound casual. Mom called yesterday. Said they were sending a gift. Leo didn't answer. His gaze was fixed on the box, his brow furrowed. He has a way of seeing the grain in things, of understanding their structure, and right now, he was seeing something in this box that I was missing. Well, I said, walking towards it. Let's see what it is. Don't open it. His voice was low and flat, stripped of its usual warmth. I laughed, a little nervously. Why? You think it's going to explode? He didn't smile. He just nodded toward the shipping label. Look. Really look at it, Clara. I leaned in, my curiosity pricked by his seriousness. The label was computer printed. My name and address were correct. But the return address wasn't their home. It was a P.O. box in a town I didn't recognize, a drab industrial suburb miles from their leafy street. There was no handwritten note, no happy birthday, love mom and dad scrawled in the corner. It was as impersonal as a utility bill. A small, cold knot formed in my stomach. This wasn't a gift. This was a transaction. Leo stepped closer, his presence a warm, solid shield at my back. He reached out and tapped the bottom corner of the box with his index finger. There, he said softly. Do you see it? I followed his finger. And then I froze. It wasn't something loud or obvious. It was a detail, a tiny one, almost invisible. Embossed faintly into the cardboard, no bigger than a thumbnail, was a small, stylized logo, a circle with a leaf unfurling inside it. My breath caught in my throat. The image transported me back a year to that brief, awkward visit to Sarah's apartment, which she was using as a makeshift headquarters for Earth and Grace Designs. The place was a chaotic jumble of packing materials and half-filled boxes. And all of them, every single one, had borne that same embossed leaf. I remembered picking one up, and she had snatched it from my hands with a nervous laugh. Careful. The supplier is super strict about the packaging. They track everything. Strict. That was the word she had used. This wasn't an old box they had reused. This was a new box, shipped directly from her supplier. To me, the cold knot in my stomach tightened into a ball of ice. This wasn't an olive branch. It was a Trojan horse. And it was sitting on my kitchen counter. As if on cue, my phone, lying on the table, began to ring. The screen lit up with my mother's name. Leo looked from the phone to me, his eyes dark with a grim understanding. I felt a strange and terrible calm settle over me, the kind of clarity that comes when you finally see the map of a place you've been lost in for years. I swiped to answer and, without a second thought, pressed the speakerphone button. Clara, darling. Did it arrive? My mother's voice flooded the kitchen, syrupy and false. I glanced at the box, then at Leo. He gave a subtle, almost imperceptible shake of his head. Yes, Mom, I said, my voice a carefully constructed imitation of delight. It just got here. Oh, wonderful. And did you open it? What do you think? A lie formed on my lips, smooth and easy, a defense mechanism honed over a lifetime. I did. It's beautiful. Really. Thank you so much. A sigh of what sounded like relief whispered through the speaker. Oh, I'm so glad, sweetheart. We just wanted to do something special for you. We just wanted to remind you how much we love you. You're our girl. Don't ever forget that. My stomach dropped. The repetition of that phrase wasn't a loving affirmation. It was an incantation, a script she was reading from. You're so strong, Clara, she added, her voice suddenly earnest. You always have been. And then she hung up. The silence that followed was heavy and profound. The rain had softened to a drizzle. Leo and I just stood there, the box between us like a silent, accusing witness. I hate how nice she was, I whispered finally, the words tasting like ash. I know, Leo said, his hand finding mine, his fingers lacing through my own. She only calls you darling when she's about to ask for something, or when she's lying. They never send gifts, I continued, the pieces clicking into place with sickening precision. For Christmas 2 years ago, they gave Sarah a top-of-the-line elliptical machine and gave me a scented candle that I'm pretty sure they bought at a gas station. Leo squeezed my hand. I think that candle had already been lit. We stood there for a long time, the warmth of his hand a small anchor in a suddenly treacherous sea. I had the wild urge to hurl the box into the street, to watch it shatter on the wet pavement. But I also felt a cold, clear resolve solidifying within me. They had drawn me onto their map, a place of danger and deceit. But I was the cartographer. I would be the one to define the borders. I would be the one to chart the way out. I took a deep breath. Leo, I said, my voice steady. Can you get my laptop? I need to record this. He didn't ask why. He just nodded, his expression grim but resolute. He understood. I didn't open the box. I did something else instead. I documented it. I took photos from every angle. The pristine tape, the shipping label with the unfamiliar P.O. box, and a close-up of the tiny, embossed leaf. I wrote down the time of my mother's call and transcribed her words from memory, noting the false sweetness, the scripted lines. I was no longer just a daughter. I was a witness. 30 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. It wasn't the gentle tap of a neighbor. It was a firm, official rap that vibrated through the old wood of the door. Leo and I exchanged a look. He moved to stand slightly behind me as I opened it. 2 police officers stood on our porch, their uniforms dark against the gray morning, their faces polite and unreadable. "Ma'am, are you Clara Vance?" the taller one asked. I nodded, my heart hammering a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. "We've received an anonymous report about a suspicious package delivered to this address. Do you mind if we come in?" They thought I would open it. They thought I would panic. They had tipped off the police themselves, assuming that by the time they arrived, my fingerprints would be all over the contents, my fate sealed. They had laid a perfect trap. But they had underestimated me. They had forgotten that I'm the one who reads the maps, who sees the hidden terrain. I stepped back and opened the door wider, my voice clear and calm. "Of course, officer. Please come in. The package is right here." The 2 officers, a man named Davies and a woman named Chin, moved with a quiet professionalism that was both calming and deeply unsettling. Our cozy kitchen, usually a sanctuary of warmth and the scent of coffee, suddenly felt like a crime scene. The box sat on the counter, looking smaller and more ordinary under their clinical gaze. "So this is the package that was delivered this morning?" Officer Davies asked, his eyes scanning it without touching it. "That's right," I said. "It's a birthday present from my parents." "And you haven't opened it?" Officer Chin added, her focus on me. "No," I replied. Something about it felt off. Officer Davies nodded slowly. "Would you consent to us opening it here?" "Please," Leo said, his voice firm. He stood by the doorway, a silent, watchful guardian of our home. They put on blue nitrile gloves and, using a small utility knife, Officer Davies sliced through the tape with surgical precision. The sound of the cardboard tearing was unnervingly loud in the quiet room. He folded back the flaps. Inside, nestled in a bed of wood shavings, were several objects wrapped in thick, coarse linen. They weren't birthday gifts. There was no cheerful card, no ribbon, no tissue paper. Officer Chin carefully lifted one of the bundles. It was heavy. She unwrapped it on the counter. It was a piece of stone, dark and fossilized, bearing the perfect, ghostly imprint of an ancient fern. It was undeniably beautiful, but it radiated an aura of deep time, of something that belonged in a museum, not on a kitchen counter in Port Blossom. There were other pieces, a chunk of unpolished amber with an insect trapped inside, and a small, terracotta figurine of an animal, its surface weathered and cracked with age. Tucked at the bottom was a packing slip from Earth and Grace Designs, listing the items as artisanal geological decor. And under the description, my name and address were printed as the recipient. Officer Davies picked up the fossil, turning it over in his gloved hands. He exchanged a significant look with his partner. "Ma'am, do you know what these are?" "They look like artifacts," I said honestly. "Fossils, maybe? Do you know where they came from?" I took a breath. This was the moment. The fork in the road. I could play dumb, protect them, and take the fall, just as I had done my whole life. Or I could tell the truth. I could honor the map I had drawn for myself. "My sister, Serafina Vance, runs an online business called Earth and Grace Designs," I said, my voice even. "That's her packing slip. My parents called me this morning to make sure I had received their gift. They seemed very insistent that I open it." Officer Chen's expression remained neutral, but I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. "You have a record of this call?" "I do," I said. I picked up my phone, my hand surprisingly steady, and played the recording. My mother's syrupy voice filled the kitchen again. "Did you open it? We just wanted to remind you how much we love you. You're our girl. You're so strong, Clara." I stopped the recording. The silence that followed was damning. "We're going to need to take these items and the packaging as evidence," Officer Davies said, his tone all business. This shipment contains artifacts that are part of an ongoing investigation into the illegal trafficking of protected paleontological and archaeological items. You're not being charged with anything at this time, Mrs. Vance. Your cooperation is appreciated. They carefully rewrapped the artifacts, placed them back in the box, and sealed it with evidence tape. As they carried it out of my house, it felt like they were removing a tumor. Leo walked them to the door, answering a few more procedural questions. I sank into a chair at our oak table, the one Leo's hands had made. The coffee in my mug was cold. The rain had stopped, and a weak, watery sunlight was filtering through the clouds, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I felt strangely empty, hollowed out, but also lighter than I had in years. The weight of their secrets was no longer mine to carry. It took less than 2 hours for the next call to come. I didn't have to look at the screen to know who it was. I answered and said nothing. How could you? My mother's voice was no longer sweet. It was a shard of glass. I remained silent, listening to the frantic, ragged edge of her breathing. You told them. You told them it was Sarah, she shrieked. I told them who sent the package, I said calmly. I told them you called. I told them the truth. You know what this will do to her. Her business, her reputation. She's fragile, Clara. Yes, I said. I do. You could have just kept your mouth shut. You could have said it was a mistake, a mix-up. You didn't have to throw your own sister under the bus. You put her in the driver's seat, I replied, a cold fury rising in me now. You handed her the keys, pointed her toward my house, and told her to step on the gas. You called me to make sure the package arrived, and then you called the police, didn't you? A choked, sputtering silence. Then, my father's voice, low and gravelly, came on the line. The voice of reluctant, disappointed authority. We didn't have a choice, Clara. They were getting close. If the shipment was intercepted at her place, it would have been over. We thought if it was found with you, it would just be a seizure. A warning. No one would get hurt. No one but me, I thought. So you sent stolen goods to my house, in my name, and hoped I'd be stupid enough to take the fall for you. Clara, be reasonable, he said, the condescending tone he always used when he was losing an argument. You're stronger than she is. You've always been the strong one. And Sarah isn't built for this kind of stress, my mother sobbed. You are. You don't have children. You don't have the same pressures. Your life is simpler. You would have bounced back. And there it was. The justification laid bare. It wasn't just that they thought I was strong. It was that they thought my life was expendable. My peace, my career, my home, my husband, my future, all of it was worth less than my sister's comfort. My childlessness, a source of quiet grief for me and Leo after a difficult miscarriage 2 years ago, was, to them, a strategic advantage. I had less to lose. The fury inside me dissolved, replaced by a profound and desolate clarity. It wasn't anger anymore. It was an ending. You've always been the cold one, Clara, my mother whispered, her final, pathetic attempt to wound me. And look what you've done to this family. No, I said, my voice no louder than a breath. Look what you've done. I ended the call. I didn't slam the phone down. I just pressed the button, severing the connection. I looked across the table at Leo, who had returned and was now watching me, his face a canvas of sorrow and support. The space on the counter where the box had been was just an empty space. But it felt vast, like a newly discovered ocean on a map. They really thought I'd just open it, I said, my voice shaking slightly. They thought I'd take the blame. Again. Leo came over and wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. His embrace was the sturdiest thing I had ever known. They don't know who you are anymore, Clara, he said softly into my hair. They only know the person they needed you to be. And in the quiet of our kitchen, with the scent of rain and coffee in the air, I knew he was right. I was finally off their map. The weeks that followed were a strange landscape of silence and bureaucracy. A detective named Alistair Finch became my point of contact. He was a kind, tired-looking man with a gentle voice that belied the grim nature of his work. He called to get a formal statement, to ask questions that chipped away at the remaining facade of my family's innocence. Mrs. Vance, your name appears on the initial business registration for Earth and Grace Designs, he told me one rainy Tuesday afternoon. It lists you as a silent partner. A laugh, brittle and humorless, escaped me. Of course it does. We also have a digital signature on file for the supplier contracts. It's your name. Can you confirm if this is your signature? He emailed me the document. I opened it on my laptop. There was my name, Clara Vance, scrawled in a looping, flamboyant cursive that looked nothing like my own neat, architectural print. It was a forgery, and a poor one at that, like something a child would trace. It was Sarah's handwriting trying to be mine. No, I told him, a strange calm washing over me. That is not my signature. I spent the rest of the afternoon digging through old files, scanning copies of my passport, my driver's license, my actual signature on bank documents. I sent them all to Detective Finch, along with a formal, notarized affidavit stating that I had never consented to, or had any knowledge of, my name being used in connection with Serafina Vance's business. I was drawing a new map, one with clear, undeniable truths and ironclad borders. The silence from my family was absolute. It was as if they had fallen off the edge of the earth. I knew, through the grapevine of a well-meaning aunt, that Sarah's website had been taken down, her assets frozen. The legal gears were turning, slow and inexorable. The charges were formally laid a month later. Wire fraud, mail fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, and violations of the Archaeological Resources Protection Act. Sarah's name was on the docket, but so were my parents, as co-conspirators who had knowingly facilitated and funded the operation. I didn't go to the court hearings. I didn't need to see Sarah's performative tears or my mother's stony-faced martyrdom. I didn't need to see my father looking lost and betrayed, as if he were the victim. Leo offered to go, to be my eyes and ears, but I told him no. Their story was no longer my story. I chose to receive the updates through Detective Finch, who delivered the news with a dispassionate professionalism that I was grateful for. They all took plea bargains. Sarah received 2 years of probation, a hefty fine that would likely bankrupt her for a decade, and was barred from conducting any business for 5 years. My parents got suspended sentences, a smaller fine, and 200 hours of community service each. Their names, once a source of quiet suburban pride, were now in the public record, attached to a crime of greed and deception. There was no hiding. There was no explaining it away. A week after the sentencing, a letter arrived. It was on plain cream-colored stationery, the kind my mother used for condolence notes. Her handwriting was elegant and controlled. It was a request to meet. Just her and my father. At a neutral location. To talk, it said. I almost threw it away. But some part of me, the cartographer who needs to see the landscape to its final edge, knew I had to go. It wasn't for them. It was for me. It was the last landmark I needed to place on my old map before I could fold it up for good. We met at a sterile coffee shop halfway between my city and theirs, a place with no memories. They were already there, sitting at a small table, looking older and smaller than I remembered. My mother had arranged her face into a mask of solemn sorrow. My father just looked tired. I ordered a black coffee and sat down, leaving my coat on. I didn't intend to stay long. Clara, my mother began, her voice soft and rehearsed. We wanted to say, we are so sorry for how this all turned out. For how it turned out, I noted. Not for what they did. We never thought it would go this far, my father added, stirring his coffee with a clatter. Sarah just got in over her head. She's not a bad person. She's just ambitious. She forged my signature, I said, my voice flat. She used my identity to commit federal crimes. You funded it. And then you tried to make me the scapegoat. That's a little more than ambitious. My mother's composure cracked. We were trying to protect her. It's what parents do. You wouldn't understand, you don't have children. The familiar knife, twisted again. I met her gaze, and for the first time, I felt no pain. Only a distant, clinical pity. My ability to have children has nothing to do with your decision to sacrifice my life for hers, I said, the words clean and precise. You didn't see a strong daughter. You saw a safety net. You saw someone whose quiet, stable life looked like a resource you could plunder. You thought my happiness was less valuable than hers. They stared at me, speechless. The truth, spoken so plainly, had left no room for their usual manipulations. I stood up, my coffee untouched. You talk about what parents do. A parent's job is to love all their children, not to use one to shield the other. You failed at that. You failed me. I looked at them one last time, these two strangers who had drawn the first, flawed maps of my world. There was no anger left, no burning rage. There was only a great, quiet sadness for the love I should have had, and a profound, unshakable peace in the love I had found. I hope you find what you're looking for in your community service, I said. I hope you learn something about what it means to be responsible for your own actions. I walked out of the coffee shop and didn't look back. The air outside was cool and crisp. I got in my car and drove north, towards the rain and the moss and the quiet, sturdy love of my home. That night, I blocked their numbers. I deleted their emails. I untagged myself from old family photos online. It was a digital erasure, a final redrawing of my own borders. It wasn't an act of revenge. It was an act of preservation. The next morning, I was at my drafting table, the wide window in front of me looking out onto our green, dripping garden. Leo came in and placed a mug of steaming coffee beside my hand. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't need to. He just rested his hand on my shoulder for a moment, a silent affirmation. I looked at the blank sheet of paper before me, at the sharp, clean potential of it. For my entire life, I had navigated a landscape defined by others, my path dictated by their needs, my horizons limited by their expectations. Now, the map was empty. The territory was mine to explore, to chart, to name. The future was an undiscovered country, and for the first time, I was not afraid of getting lost. I felt the quiet, thrilling peace of knowing I had the strength and the right to draw my own way home.